So as I move on to talk about the second year, I did decide to turn this into two video because there was a story about something that occurred in my second year, which turned out to be a longer story than I thought when I was explaining it, so I decided to make it its own video. Yes, so next we're going to be talking about my second year in Canada. So to recap so far, I arrived in Canada 2019, August, did 1 year, and you can watch the previous videos to catch up on what I did in my first year. So second year, I'm going into my third semester. Now, I'm no longer working at the burrito place because, of course, I can only work 20 hours in school time. I've now switched over to the job that I got over the summer, working for a bank. It's a call center job, doing customer service for a bank, but of course, that is a little bit better than the burrito job money wise. I think on the burrito job it was minimum wage, or earning about $14.25 per hour, which was roughly what the minimum wage was in Ontario at the time in 2019 going into 2020. Now that I moved over to this job working for the bank, I was earning like $21 per hour. Now that so of course my hours were cut back at this main job from 37.5 hours per week to 20 hours per week, as per the conditions of my study permit. My wife was working for the same company as I mentioned before in previous videos. So she was earning roughly the same money, around $21 per hour. But of course she could work full time. Yeah, so $21 per hour per week. My monthly amount went up from in the previous semesters. I would have been earning like $500 every 2 weeks, and like $1,000 per month. One thing I neglected to advise is that when my wife joined me, we moved to a basement apartment. I didn't tell you that the rent at the basement apartment was $750, and I was pretty much paying the entire rent and almost covering all of the bills. In Canada, my wife was taking care of Jamaica. Same thing continued into my second year. $750 per month in the basement room, not an apartment. It was a room. We were sharing kitchen and bathroom. But now I'm earning $21 per hour, and before taxes per month, that was in the $1,600 range, which of course was much better than $1,000 that I was making before. And because it was just the two of us in Canada, I was just taking care of food and rent, and my wife was taking care of Jamaica. Sorry, I keep repeating myself. One thing I neglected to mention as well, and this is very important. This is going to seem innocuous, but or trivial, but this is important. Over the summer of 2020, it's a pandemic, and I didn't own a car. You probably got that from just by based on the fact that I didn't mention a car. I didn't own a car because I didn't think I could afford one. Looking back now, maybe I should have bought a car, use it to do some Uber Eats instead, but if I did Uber Eats, I wouldn't really make a lot of money doing Uber Eats because I'm doing it now. It wouldn't really have paid me significantly more than working at the burrito place, so wouldn't have been great anyway. But yeah, the bicycle. Over the summer, I got the bicycle. The bicycle made taking the bus so much better. So some places I could ride to get the groceries, ride from one bus stop to the next. No longer have to do 15 minutes walks from one bus stop to the next. Made my life way better. My wife never really had it that hard because the job that she was doing was always pretty close. And she didn't do grocery shopping. I did grocery shopping. So she really didn't go out that much. So when I got the bicycle over the summer 2020, made my life way better. And um, at that point, I hadn't ridden a bicycle in like, I was 35 years old. I don't think I rode a bicycle in over like 17 years. I think the last time I rode a bicycle, I was like 18 years old, living in the countryside, 20 minutes outside of Montego Bay. But that's what I was doing. So that, of course, resulted in me being able to save money on the bus sometimes. I wouldn't have to take the bus. Yeah, so that was one thing. It's in the middle of the pandemic. I'm working from home exclusively. I'm studying from home exclusively. So that was the second year. It was uneventful. It was a good journey between, and I'm when I say second year, I mean September to April, because April I would have graduated school. So April things would have changed or will change. So I'm going to cover that part. What happened after I left school. But yeah, not much to talk about for that year, because it was I was earning okay money for a student. Bills were being taken care of. My wife was taking care of Jamaica, and as I mentioned in previous videos, we already kind of covered that. Now, a few things I should mention. There's this thing called the IELTS. It's an English test that you have to do to apply for permanent residency. My wife had the foresight to do that test like from September of 2020 in preparation for any possibility of us applying for permanent residency, because we looked at the pandemic and we said to ourselves, you know what? And this might seem as if it's impossible to know, but we looked at it and we said they're not taking in any more new students because of the pandemic. And at the time, the sentiment has changed now, but at the time, Canada really wanted students, really wanted more workers. So we said there's a possibility. We didn't say this was sure. There's a possibility that they might open up other avenues for people to apply for permanent residency. And this turned out to be true. And I'm going to cover that probably later in this video or in the next video about how we got to apply for permanent residency, because people who come here as students know the process, especially when you're studying in Ontario. You start off by being a student. You get your permanent resident. Sorry, you get your study permit, and you apply for permanent residency. You try to get a skill level job, and then that qualifies for you to apply for something that they call express entry, and that goes based on points. But because we were older by now, by the time I left school, I would have been like 36. We were losing points because of our age, so we were not 100% confident that we were going to get through with permanent residency through the express entry portal. So we decided, be prepared for any opportunity. So my wife did that English test. It's called IELTS in September. I procrastinated and eventually did mine in February of 2021. This will become important later, because you have to have that English test under your belt, passed, for you to apply for permanent residency. And I'll skip to the end and tell you. In April, around the time when I was going to leave school, they opened up a new portal, and that portal, they required around 70,000 people, and they had a few different paths. One of those paths, or two of those paths, we would have qualified for. But the one that we applied for is the one where my wife would apply just for being a service worker. And of course, those kinds of options were available. This program was called the TR to PR program, temporary to permanent resident program, and it was just temporary. Only 70,000 people they wanted for this. So you can imagine this was going to be very competitive. The portal, I think, opened up on May 6th of 2021. And a lot of people, when this was announced in April of 2021, were scrambling to get English tests done, but we already had that done. I think one of the things that we needed was medical for us and our children, because of course at this time our children were still in Jamaica, but we had to apply for them as well. And the other reason why my wife was the one to apply was because my stepson, which is the bigger one, he is her son. So if I applied, he wouldn't automatically become qualified under me because I was not his legal guardian. So she was the one to apply. The other two kids were covered. I was covered as her spouse. So that's how we got through. So that's how we got through. a less interesting, but this happened, so I have to mention it. Yeah, so it's a part of the journey, so I mention it, and it's something that other people can learn from, even though it's not financial in nature. A few things I should mention about the process of applying to permanent residencies. Number one, so as I mentioned, my wife did her IELTS English test in September 2020. I did mine in February of 2021. The portal opened up on May 6th of 2021, which was like a week or two after I was done with my studies. My wife had all the documents put together, and we did the application. The portal opened up, I remember the day it opened up at 12 o'clock, and I think, so I told you it was 70,000 total. I think, and that 7,000 was divided. I think some of it was for like healthcare workers, some of it were for like students, and some of it was for service workers. And as I mentioned to you, my wife was going to be applying under the service worker portal portion of that 70,000. I think about 30,000 slots were dedicated to that. And by the end of the first hour, because we could see how many applications were being done, I think maybe around 1,000 applications, like people had all of their documents ready and ready to go. When we saw the rate that people were doing it, we didn't hurry, because we looked at it and we said, if it was going to be 1,000 people or even 2,000 people per hour, we're going to have around 15 hours to complete the process. So my wife went slowly, carefully filling out the online forms, carefully ensuring that the documents were correct that were being uploaded. And she was actually done, I think, by about 5:30 p.m. We submitted our application May 6, 5:30 p.m. I think the portal was actually open until the next morning around 9 a.m. before it was full. So that's what it is, people. And you can imagine this is being applied for by students of all nationalities, people from Africa, people from India, Asia, right? People from the Caribbean, everybody who thought they were eligible and who was lucky enough to already have their IELTS completed. Plus, there was a medical that had to be done as well. So if you were able to do your medical, I think you could have submitted the application even before you had completed the medical. I don't remember how that process worked, but I could be wrong about that part, because this was a long time ago. And as I mentioned, it was my wife that was doing this thing. I was just there helping where I could and hearing about the process, and her telling me what she's doing. I wasn't actually doing it. I'm a person who learns by doing. So if I'm not doing it, I'm not really learning so much. So yeah. So that's how we did the application. Her application eventually was not approved until February of 2022. So almost about 9 months after the application is when it was eventually approved, and we finally got word that we were going to be approved to be permanent residents. So yeah, that's the process.